Back in the early 90s, I went on a short overnight hike along a small stretch of the Appalachian Trail with two guys I worked with. We weren't experienced hikers, not really. I was maybe 19, skinny and restless, and thinking I was tougher than I was. The other two were in their mid-20s, and like me, they just wanted to get out of town for a night and do something different. We picked a spot a few hours' drive away, packed badly, and left after work on a Friday. It rained almost as soon as we hit the trail. Not a light mist either, real steady, cold, heavy rain that soaked through everything even if you had gear. And none of us really did. I had a cheap sleeping bag, probably from a discount store, that soaked up water like a sponge. My pack was an old external frame one-eyed found in my dad's garage, metal tubes and all. The whole time we were walking up ridgelines, I was thinking about lightning, that I was probably the tallest thing around, carrying what looked like a damn antenna strapped to my back. The trail was a mess. Mud sucking at our boots, every root slick, everything smelling like wet bark and rotting leaves. We didn't talk much except to complain. It's funny, when you imagine doing something like that, you picture long talks and laughing around a fire. But when you're wet and cold and you realize you forgot things like extra socks or a tarp, the mood turns quick. We made camp on a flat patch of ground under some fir trees. No views, just trees and fog. My bag was already damp and got worse the moment I unrolled it. I didn't sleep much, just lay there listening to the wind through the branches and my coworkers tossing around, cursing every now and then. Sometime in the early hours, I started shaking hard. Not just cold, but teeth chattering, can't stop it cold. I should have known better, but I was a kid. I thought I'd be fine. I wasn't. In the morning, everything was worse. Still raining. No chance of drying anything out. We packed up and got moving. We thought we'd just backtrack out the way we came in, but somewhere, maybe trying to cut time, we took a wrong turn. It wasn't dramatic. No cliffs or lost maps. Just one of those wrong turns that slowly sneaks up on you. You think the trail looks familiar, you keep going, then suddenly the terrain's wrong and you've been walking for hours. We were snapping at each other by then. Nobody wanted to say we were lost, but we were. We stopped talking after a while, just trudging. Each step a slap of wet socks and boots, legs burning, back sore. I remember just staring at the heels of the guy in front of me, focusing on not slipping. One foot, then the other. Don't fall. Don't say anything. Just get through it. We hadn't seen a soul since we started the hike. Not one person. I remember that clear because it was something I was proud of in a dumb way. Like we were out there doing something hard and alone. But then, maybe halfway through that day, we heard someone ahead of us. Not voices, just a sound that made us all stop. It was a cough. Deep, raw, wet. Over and over again. It didn't sound like someone clearing their throat. It sounded sick. We stood there for a second, kind of frozen. Then we came around a bend and saw them. A man and a kid. The man looked to be in his 30s or 40s, but I didn't get a good look. He had his hood up, pulled down low, and he didn't say a word as we passed. Just nodded once and kept going. The kid, I'll never forget how that kid looked. Small, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a poncho that was too big, sleeves hanging over their hands. Their face was flushed, red patches on pale skin. Hair slicked to the forehead, clumped in wet strings. And the eyes glassy like the kid was barely focusing. You see eyes like that when someone's burning up with a fever. I didn't know much, but I knew that look. The kid coughed again as we passed. Loud, thick, like there was fluid in their lungs. The kind of cough that rattles in your chest just hearing it. We slowed down a little. One of my friends glanced over his shoulder. The man didn't stop, didn't look back, just kept walking, one hand on the kid's shoulder like he was guiding them forward. Not helping, just keeping them moving. Nobody said anything. Not then. We just kept walking in the opposite direction. I remember the silence after we passed them. Just rain hitting leaves. Nothing else. I don't even know why we didn't talk about it right away. Maybe we were just tired, cold, wet, focused on getting out. But I felt it, this heavy wrongness in my stomach. That little kid looked miserable. Way more miserable than we were. We were in a bad mood. That kid looked like they were in real trouble. We were miles from anything. No road, no ranger station, no cabins. Just trail. And even if they were heading toward an access point, it was hours away in either direction. I still tell myself he was the kid's dad. He had to be. But if he was, what the hell were they doing out there in the first place? The kid didn't have a real pack, just a little drawstring bag. No water bottle, no poles, and they were soaking wet. I try to give that man the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they'd gotten caught out longer than they meant to. Maybe they were just trying to get back. Maybe he had called for help already and was heading toward a pickup spot. I tell myself that now, but at the time I didn't ask. None of us did. Later, after we made it out, we sat in the car with the heat on full blast and peeled off our wet clothes. Nobody said much for a while. We were just glad to be done, glad to be dry. But that kid stuck in my head even then. And now, years later, I've got kids of my own. 2 of them. One's about the same age that kid was. And I can't stop thinking about that moment. It was maybe 5 minutes total. A blur in a long, miserable hike. But I still see that kid's face sometimes. That dazed, red-cheeked look. The way their cough seemed to tear out of them. If it happened now, if I saw that again today, I wouldn't just walk by. I'd stop. I'd ask questions. Offer food, a dry shirt, socks. Ask the man where they were going. If he needed help. If the kid needed medical attention. Because they looked like they did. And even if he told me to mind my business, I'd still try. I'd make sure they were okay. Because I can't shake the feeling that they weren't. That maybe we were the only people they crossed paths with that day, or even that weekend. And we said nothing. I've learned a lot since then. Not just about hiking or being outdoors, but about how easy it is to miss what's right in front of you when you're cold, tired, and too wrapped up in your own misery. That little kid wasn't a ghost, wasn't a dream, just a sick child on a trail, in the rain, far from help. I don't know what happened to them. I hope they made it out. I hope the man took care of them. I hope that whatever the story was, it ended okay. But I'll never know, and I'll never forget. I'm not the outdoorsy type. I'm from Baltimore, born and raised. And I grew up in a place where the only trees you really saw were in someone's yard or growing out of a cracked sidewalk. I wasn't built for hiking. Bugs, dirt, no cell service. None of that appealed to me. But I've always had a good sense of direction, weirdly sharp. I don't know how or why, but even when I'm somewhere unfamiliar, I can usually figure out where I am and how to get back. This happened when I was up in Westminster. My boy was staying out there for a few months, helping his cousin do some renovation work or something. I went up to chill with him one weekend, and he wanted to show me some spot he had found not far from where he was staying. Said it was real quiet, and we could smoke and walk and not worry about people or anything. I didn't really feel like going, but I figured what the hell. I was carrying a book bag with some stuff in it, mostly clothes and my GameCube since we were planning to play Smash later that night. Yeah, it's dumb, but I didn't want to leave it in his cousin's busted-ass house while we were out. We headed out while it was still a little light out, just that early evening kind of glow where it's not dark yet. But the shadows are getting longer and the sun is just barely behind the trees. The trail wasn't marked or anything. It was more like a dirt path where people had walked enough times that it turned into something you could follow. Trees on both sides, and the kind of open space that made everything feel a little too quiet. Like peaceful, but in a way that made the back of my neck itch. He lit a blunt about halfway through the walk. We were talking, laughing a bit, just keeping things light. I wasn't really paying attention to the woods themselves, but at one point, I remember looking around and realizing that I couldn't hear anything. Like no birds, no wind, not even bugs. It was just dead silent. That kind of silence that makes your ears ring, and you feel like you're holding your breath even when you're not. I stopped walking without meaning to, and my boy stopped too. He looked at me, then looked around like he just noticed it too. Then we both heard it. A crunch. Real soft, but not something you could mistake. Dry leaves or twigs, maybe 30 feet off to our left. We both turned our heads at the same time. He pulled out his phone and flicked on the flashlight, kind of waving it over in that direction. At first, we didn't see anything. It was just an open field on that side, real flat, kind of damp looking, with some tall grass here and there. No trees for at least a few yards. Just looked empty. Then he turned the light just a little more to the left, and that's when we saw him. This guy was maybe 15, 20 feet away, standing still, kind of hunched over like he had just stopped walking. His eyes caught the light first. Shiny, glassy, wide open like he was either high or hadn't blinked in too long. He looked rough, real thin, sickly, with these dirty basketball shorts on, a white tank top that was stained all over, and a pair of scuffed-up Timberlands. His arms were just hanging by his sides, but in his right hand he was holding a knife, like a buck knife or something, not a kitchen knife. You could tell it had weight to it. I don't know what it was about him, but he didn't feel like a normal person. I don't mean anything supernatural or anything like that. I just mean the way he looked at us. Like he wasn't really seeing us, or like he was too far gone to care what we were. Scared the hell out of me. Not gonna lie, for a second I thought he was some kind of zombie. Not the kind from movies. Just one of those half-dead people you see when you go through the bad parts of town at the wrong hour. The kind you don't want to make eye contact with. My friend is short, not built for fighting or running really, and he was high out of his mind. I'm taller, 6'1", and I guess I just moved on instinct. I stepped in front of him without thinking, dropped my weight a bit like I was ready to brace for something, and locked eyes with this dude. He didn't say anything, didn't yell or make a sound. Just suddenly started moving toward us, faster than I expected. It wasn't a walk. It wasn't a jog. It was like a lurching run, legs not quite working right, shoulders swinging too wide, knife still hanging down by his leg. My whole body went cold. I reached back, grabbed my satchel, and without even really aiming, I swung it as hard as I could when he got close. The bag wasn't heavy, but it had my GameCube in it, which has some weight. It hit him right on the side of his head, temple area, with a solid kind of thud that I felt in my shoulder. He dropped, not completely out, but enough to stumble and fall forward, catching himself on his hands and knees. My friend was already gone, flashlight bouncing like crazy as he ran down the dirt path. I didn't stick around to see if the guy was getting back up. I turned and ran after him. It wasn't easy with the bag on my back. It kept bouncing and shifting, and every sound behind me felt like footsteps. I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to know if he was coming or how fast. I just focused on the light my boy was casting ahead of him, shaking like crazy, but still showing the path. My chest was tight, and my legs were burning before we were even halfway back. But I kept going. Adrenaline's a hell of a thing. He made it to his cousin's house first and slammed the door behind him. When I got there, I had to bang on it for what felt like forever. I could hear him yelling inside, paranoid and freaking out. Eventually, I heard the lock turn, and he opened the door just enough to let me in. We locked everything, every door, every window, turned off all the lights and sat there in silence for a while, trying to listen for footsteps or knocking or whatever, but nothing came. Stayed quiet. I think we waited like an hour before either of us moved again. I went straight to the kitchen and killed a full bag of pepperoni pizza combos. Stress eating doesn't even describe it. I was shaking the whole time, hands greasy, eyes still darting to the windows. My heart didn't calm down for a long time. Later that night, after things settled down a bit and we talked ourselves out of calling anyone, I checked the GameCube. It was fine. No cracks, no dents. Still worked perfectly when we hooked it up. We didn't talk much while we played. The weed had worn off, and the silence between rounds felt heavier than usual. I kept replaying the moment over and over. The eyes, the knife, the swing. That feeling of hitting someone in the head with a console inside a canvas bag. It was real. Too real. I don't know who he was. I never saw anything about it on the news. No missing persons, no arrests, no break-ins. Just nothing. It was like it didn't happen, except I still remember the exact weight of my bag when I swung it, the way the field looked under that weak flashlight, and the sound of those footsteps in the leaves. I haven't been hiking since. I was hiking alone that morning like I usually do. It was early fall, somewhere along one of the lesser-used spurs off the Appalachian Trail. The leaves had just started to turn, those deep reds and bright oranges glowing through the canopy. There was a crispness in the air, not quite cold but enough to remind you that summer was done. I like the quieter trails, the ones most people skip. Fewer footprints, fewer people to deal with. Just the sound of your boots on dirt and the wind through the trees. I always carry a pistol. I don't go deep into the woods without one. Not because I expect trouble, but because you never really know what's out there. I've had run-ins with wild hogs, stray dogs, and more than once I've seen bears a little too close for comfort. It's better to have it and not need it. That day, I left the main trail to follow a game path that looked like it climbed toward a ridge. I figured I might get a better view up there, maybe grab a few pictures. The path was rough, overgrown, lots of down branches and rocks, but I didn't mind. I moved slowly, taking my time, scanning the trees, listening to the forest. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl came from a thick patch of brush off to my right. I stopped cold. It wasn't loud, but it was deep and it felt wrong. I've heard a lot of animal noises over the years. Bobcats, coyotes, even the coughing bark of a fox at night. But this didn't sound like anything I recognized. It was low, like it was coming from a big chest, and it had a kind of vibration to it, like you could feel it more than hear it. I stood still, straining to see into the thicket. The brush was thick, mostly mountain laurel and some old fallen limbs. I couldn't see anything. No movement, no eyes shining back. Just that feeling like something was there. I reached down, quietly unholstered my pistol, and kept it low by my side. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the brush, not turning my back to it. I didn't run. I've always believed running just kicks in a predator's instinct. I put about 100 yards between me and that patch of woods before I turned and made my way back to the main trail. Once I was back on solid trail, I felt a little better. I holstered the pistol but kept alert. I moved at a good pace for a bit, trying to get some distance. It was maybe half an hour later when I came across a man and a woman hiking with a dog. A big shepherd mix from the looks of it. The dog was on edge, barking, pulling hard against the leash. The couple were struggling with it, trying to calm it down or hold it back. I gave them a wide berth and nodded as I passed. We didn't talk. I wish we had. I wanted to say something, to tell them about the growl. But the dog was making so much noise and they were clearly having a hard time with it. I figured they wouldn't go off trail, not with that dog in tow. I moved on. After maybe another 100 yards, I found a decent spot to rest. A big flat rock just off the trail, some sunlight coming through the trees. I dropped my pack and sat down to eat lunch, jerky, some nuts, water. I was halfway through when I heard the dog again. It wasn't just barking now. It was frantic, full panic mode. High-pitched, angry, desperate. Then suddenly it changed. There was a yelp, sharp and cut off fast. Then silence. No barking, no voices, no movement. I froze. Every sound in the forest seemed to go quiet, like the air itself was holding still. I shoved my food back in the pack, slung it over my shoulder, and started back in the direction I came from. I didn't run, but I moved fast. I stayed off the edge of the trail, kept my hand near my pistol. When I got back to where I'd seen the couple, they were gone. No trace. I called out once, then stopped myself. Something didn't feel right. I walked a little further down, then cut off the trail toward where I thought the game path might lead. I was careful. I searched around, looked for tracks, anything. I found nothing. No dog, no people, no prints, just quiet woods. I waited around a bit, paced, listened. I didn't hear anything else. No movement, no voices, no sign of them. After a while, I gave up and kept moving. I finished my hike and made it back to my truck by dusk. On the drive home, I kept thinking about that dog's bark, how it turned to that yelp, the kind of sound an animal makes when it knows it's in real danger. That sound stuck with me. Over the next few days, I kept checking the local news. I looked through missing persons reports, local papers, forums. I searched keywords, dates, anything that might bring up a mention of a man, woman, and a big dog on that trail. Nothing. No one reported missing. No vehicles abandoned at trailheads. No news stories. Just silence. Like they were never there. I know what I saw. I know I passed them. I remember the dog pulling, the way the woman looked frustrated, and the man kept saying something I couldn't hear over the barking. I remember their faces, even if just briefly, but it was like they vanished into the woods. and whatever was in that thicket, whatever growled at me, was still out there. I've gone back a few times since. Not alone and never without gear. But I've never gone back to that exact spot, not off the trail like that. I've looked around, tried to retrace my steps. It all feels normal now, just empty woods. Nothing to see. But every time I step into that area, I feel it again. That pressure in the air, like something's watching. Like the forest is waiting. I don't have answers. I don't believe in stories about monsters or strange creatures or the paranormal. I stick to what I know: tracks, smells, signs, patterns. But I also know that forests are deep and old and full of things we don't always see. Sometimes things move through them that don't leave signs. Sometimes people go missing without a trace. Sometimes sounds come out of the brush that don't match anything you've ever heard. I think about that couple more than I care to admit. I wonder if they made it out, if they turned back, if the dog got away from them. But deep down, I don't think they did. I think something happened in those woods that day, something I almost walked into. I was lucky. I backed out. I left. That was years ago. I still hike. I still carry my pistol. But I don't go off trail much anymore. Not alone. I don't chase views from ridges I haven't mapped. The woods haven't changed, but I have. I pay attention to the small things now. The sudden silence, the way birds stop singing, the feeling that something's just behind the trees watching. That growl. I still hear it in my head sometimes. Deep, low, not quite animal. Something that didn't want me there. Whatever it was, it's still out there. I've had my fair share of strange, tense, and downright terrifying outdoor experiences, but 3 of them will always stick with me. I still think about them sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Each time felt different. One with a friend, one with my girlfriend, now wife, and one with our baby on my back. They all ended okay, but none of them went the way I expected. The first one was in college. My buddy and I were planning a 3-day spring skiing trip up at Tuckerman's Ravine on Mount Washington. If you've never been, there are no lifts, just your legs, your skis, and a lot of hard work. It's beautiful, raw, and brutal. The mountain is known for having some of the worst weather in the world. We had camped near the lean-tos, about 2 or 3 hours hike from the parking lot. We were carrying all our ski gear, food, and camping stuff. Not exactly light packs. That morning, we woke up to bright blue skies. It was cold but not unbearable, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Felt like it was going to be a perfect day. But the Forest Service report posted at the trailhead the day before had warned of 50 miles per hour winds at the summit. We thought we'd be smart, wait until the afternoon and just do a shorter hike in the morning, then ski later if the wind died down. We hiked for maybe an hour from our lean-to. We weren't far, we could still see the roof of the lean-to in the distance between the trees. But then, out of nowhere, the weather flipped. Clouds rolled in fast. It was like someone hit a switch. The wind picked up and visibility dropped to nothing in what felt like just 10 minutes. It wasn't just snowing, it was a full whiteout blizzard. We were above the tree line by then, and with no visual markers, everything looked the same. White in every direction. We tried to retrace our steps, but there were no tracks anymore. The wind had wiped them away, and everything was coated in thick, blowing snow. I couldn't tell where we were going anymore. We kept trying to go downhill, thinking we'd eventually hit a trail or the lean-tos, but after an hour or 2, it became clear we were on the wrong side of the mountain. The snow got deeper. Sometimes we'd drop waist deep, sometimes up to our chest, post-holing down slopes that should have taken 10 minutes to descend but took over an hour. We didn't stop because we knew if we did, we'd freeze. Eventually, we saw what looked like a power line in the distance, and we followed it until we reached a road. It felt like we'd been hiking for 10 hours, but maybe it was just 4 or 5. Still, we weren't anywhere near where we were supposed to be. We walked along the road for what felt like forever. No cars. Everything was buried in snow. We finally found a little roadside motel. We must have looked like hell. 2 guys covered in snow, soaked to the bone, carrying ski gear and no idea where we were. We begged the guy at the front desk for a room. He was hesitant at first, but we didn't have anywhere else to go, and eventually he let us in. The next morning, we hitchhiked back to the base parking lot, about 20 miles. We had to go back up to the lean-tos to get our skis and camping gear. That climb took hours, and when we got there, the wind was howling so hard the trees were bending. We packed up fast. The trail down was solid ice. We couldn't really ski it. We had to slide our skis down sideways just to stay upright. That trip left a mark. I still think about how quickly the weather turned and how close we were to something much worse happening. A few years later, I had another close call, this time with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. We were cross-country skiing in Vermont in early spring. It was meant to be a long one-way trip using the Long Trail system. We left one car at the end of the trail and drove to the starting point in my brother's car. We had a map, compass, and some basic gear, enough for a long day but not an overnight. There had been fresh snow recently, and we were the only ones on the trail. It was beautiful and quiet. We followed tree markers, white blazes, but at some point we noticed the trail didn't quite match the map anymore. Unbeknownst to us, the trail had been rerouted the previous summer, but the old markers were still up in some areas. At first, we thought we could backtrack, but with no other tracks in the snow, we couldn't even tell where we'd come from. Everything was just soft, untouched snow in every direction. As the sun started to drop lower in the sky, we realized we weren't going to find our way out before dark. We decided to stop and dig in. I carved a pit in the snow, trying to make a windbreak for a small fire. We had some snacks and extra layers, but nothing close to proper camping gear. I got the fire going and felt like maybe we'd be okay. But around 10 o'clock that night, the pit walls collapsed inward from the heat and melted snow. The fire went out. It was pitch black. The cold was cutting through every layer we had. I tried to stay calm, but something deep in my mind was rebelling. I couldn't get warm again. We dug into the snow and made rough caves, just enough to curl into. Then the moon came up. It was bright enough to see the outlines of the trees and reflect off the snow. I got my skis back on and started looking for firewood. A few hours later, around 3 in the morning, we heard engine sounds. Snowmobiles. My brother had called the police when we didn't show up at the trailhead, and a group of volunteers had been sent out to look for us. It took another 3 hours to ride back to our car. By then we were exhausted, cold, and sore, but safe. I've never felt more grateful for a rescue in my life. The last story happened a couple of years after that in California. We were hiking in the Angeles National Forest with our baby. He was maybe 9 months old, riding in a backpack carrier on my back. It was a clear day, and the trail was quiet. Not many people around. We were about halfway through a loop when I saw it. A mountain lion. It was maybe 100 feet ahead, standing just off the trail, staring at us. My heart skipped a beat. Everything went still. My wife stiffened and, for a second, panicked. She yelled something about running, but I shook my head and didn't move. I stayed facing the cat and started slowly backing up, step by step. The cat didn't move at first, just stared. Eventually, it walked away into the brush. We waited a few more seconds, then turned around and made our way back the way we came, fast but not running. Once we were out of immediate danger, my wife grabbed the baby and took off down the trail, holding him like a football. She ran past a group of hikers coming up the trail. When I caught up to her, I asked if she had warned them. She just looked at me and said she wanted someone between us and the lion. I didn't even blame her. Something primal had kicked in, pure maternal instinct. We didn't hear anything on the news, so I assumed the hikers were fine or never saw it. But that moment stuck with me. Not just the danger, but how fast your brain and body react to keep your kids safe. Each of these times, I thought we were in control until we weren't. Nature doesn't care how prepared you are. It doesn't care how good the weather looks in the morning. It doesn't care that you've got a map, a compass, or even a baby on your back. When things go wrong out there, they go wrong fast. But every one of those days taught me something. About reading conditions better, about trusting my gut, about being ready to spend the night even if I don't plan to, and about how strong people get when there's no other option. I still hike, ski, camp, all of it. I just go out a little more ready and a little more humble, because I've seen how fast it can all turn, and I know the woods don't owe us anything. About 7 years ago, I was hiking alone in northern Utah. not too far from Logan Canyon. I had done the trail a few times before and knew it well enough to feel comfortable being alone. It was one of those early spring mornings where the snow had mostly melted, but you could still feel the chill in the shade. The trail was quiet, the sky pale and clear, and the only sounds were the crunch of my boots and the occasional call of a bird. I hadn't passed anyone on the way up. There were no cars at the trailhead. Felt like I had the whole place to myself. About 30 minutes in, as I was nearing a rocky ridge with a good overlook, I suddenly felt something. Not saw or heard at first, felt. A low, pulsing vibration in my chest. At first, I thought maybe it was a truck on a road far off in the distance, or maybe even a plane overhead, but the sound didn't come from above or any direction I could place. It seemed to come from the ground or the air around me. A deep thrumming sound, slow at first, spaced apart like a heartbeat. Then the pulses started speeding up. Not quickly, but enough that I could tell they were getting closer together, one beat after the next, like something winding up. The sound was faint, almost so quiet it felt like I could only hear it because of the silence of the place. But despite how quiet it was, it filled me with dread. Not fear, not panic, just a deep, cold unease that spread through my chest and settled in my stomach. I stopped moving. I remember standing there, turning in a slow circle, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. There was no wind, no movement in the trees, just that sound, increasing in tempo, beating faster and faster until it was almost like a hum vibrating in the back of my teeth. And then it stopped, completely, like someone had flipped a switch. Everything went dead silent. I stood there for a few more minutes, waiting, not sure what I was even waiting for. Eventually, I turned back. I hadn't even made it halfway up the trail, but I just couldn't keep going. Something about that sound had wormed its way under my skin. I hiked down, got back to my car, and drove home. Later that day, I told my partner what I'd heard. He was skeptical at first, but agreed to go back up there with me the next day to see if we could hear it again. We hiked to the same spot, stood quietly, and waited. And sure enough, after maybe 20 minutes, we both heard it. That same low, pulsing hum. He heard it too. He looked at me with this confused expression, like he didn't want to say anything because he didn't know what to say. We waited again for it to stop. It followed the same pattern. Slow at first, then faster, faster, then silence. Nothing happened. No animals, no movement, no other sounds. We left again, both unsettled. When we got home, we searched everywhere we could. Reddit, forums, wildlife sound archives, weird nature videos. We found a few guesses, maybe a distant generator, maybe wind through rock formations, but nothing matched what we'd heard. We dropped it after a while, but it stayed in the back of my mind. 2 years later, we were backpacking in central Utah, somewhere near the San Rafael Swell. We'd hiked most of the day and found a little flat spot near a dry wash to set up camp. It was a nice evening, warm light, quiet, not much wind. We were sitting near our tent, cooking, just enjoying the calm, when that same sound started again. Slower this time. We both froze. It was exactly the same as before. That slow, heavy thrum that you didn't just hear. You felt it. The same sense of unease crawled up my spine like cold water. We didn't say a word. We just looked at each other and agreed without speaking. We weren't staying there. We packed up quickly, before it got dark, and hiked about another hour before stopping for the night in a different spot, closer to some trees. The sound didn't come back that evening, but around dawn, just as the sky was turning that gray-blue before sunrise, I woke up and heard it again. Quieter than before, but definitely there. I stayed still in my sleeping bag, listening to it build again, faster and faster until gone. We didn't eat breakfast that morning, just packed up and got moving. We didn't run, but we hiked faster than usual. Every little sound felt bigger, more important, but the rest of the trip was quiet. Still, that sound stuck with us. We talked about it a lot afterward, trying to make sense of it. Years went by. I never forgot it. Once in a while, we'd go back and search online again, but nothing ever really explained it. Then one day, I posted about it on the Salt Lake City subreddit, just asking if anyone had ever heard something like that. A few people responded, mostly with jokes or guesses. But one person, a stranger, replied with something that finally made sense. They said it sounded like the mating call of a grouse, specifically the drumming sound made by male grouse to attract females. I looked it up, watched videos, and there it was, that same deep, slow thrum. It sounded a little different in videos, maybe because of recording equipment or the environment, but it was the closest thing we'd ever found. That was it, a bird. I should have felt stupid, but I didn't, because when you hear that sound out in the wild with no explanation, and you're alone, it doesn't sound like a bird. It sounds like something bigger, something hidden. But knowing what it was finally put my mind at ease. That wasn't the only weird experience we had out there though. Once, down in Grand Staircase Escalante, we took a wrong turn trying to get to a remote canyon. We had enough water and thought we'd be fine, but we ended up completely off track, wandering for hours through dry washes and sandstone cliffs. The map didn't help, and the sun was brutal. We started out at 9 a.m., expecting to be back to the car by late afternoon. But by the time the sun was setting, we still hadn't found our way. The food was gone. Our last bit of water was warm and nearly empty. We'd already resigned ourselves to having to camp out without supplies. As the sun dipped below the cliffs, we climbed up onto a bluff hoping to get a better view. And there, in the distance, almost too far to believe, we saw the shimmer of metal. Our car. We had overshot our trailhead by miles, coming out at a completely different spot. Took another hour of careful walking, but we got there. Dead tired, feet sore, and absolutely starving. That night, sleeping in the back of the car, was one of the best nights of sleep I've ever had. Another time in the same region, I stepped into what looked like ordinary mud. My foot sank, and before I could react, I was stuck up to my hip in quicksand. It wasn't like in movies, it was slower, heavier. The more I moved, the deeper I went. I had to lay flat and pull myself out, using my other leg and arms to drag my body across the surface. Took a long time to get free, and when I did, I was soaked in muddy sand and completely shaken. Looking back, those experiences all seemed disconnected. The sound, the getting lost, the quicksand. But in some strange way, they tie together for me. They remind me that even in a place I think I know, nature can still surprise me. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's confusing, but it's always real. There was no ghost, no creature, no lost civilization. Just the land and me and the things I didn't understand yet. Now I do, and I still hike. I still go out there, but I carry those memories with me, and I always listen a little closer when the woods go quiet. I spent half of 2021 living out of a hotel on the New Hampshire-Vermont border. It was the kind of place with faded carpets, a vending machine that never worked, and a constant smell of stale coffee in the hallways. I was there for work, staying longer than I expected, so I started mountain biking to keep my head straight. Most days after I clocked out, I'd throw the bike in the back of my truck and head out to the trails around Mount Ascutney. They were quiet, peaceful, just the sound of wind through the trees and the tires crunching over gravel and roots. One day in early August, the air was thick and damp, like the kind of weather that sticks to your skin. I remember the clouds were heavy but holding off rain. I parked near Route 44A, a spot I'd been to a few times before. There's a trailhead right off the side of the road, mostly forgotten. I'd ridden it maybe twice before, but something pulled me back to it that day. I wanted a quieter ride, something off the more popular routes. The second I stepped onto the trail, I caught the smell. It was thick in the air, unmistakable. That sharp, sour-sweet stench of decay. I've smelled roadkill before. I've passed dead deer on the side of highways. Even had a raccoon rot under the porch when I was a kid. This was different, bigger, closer, more rotten. I stopped pedaling and let the bike coast for a bit, trying to pinpoint it. It wasn't just a whiff in the air. It clung to everything. It was coming from deeper in the woods. I don't know why, but I kept going. Curiosity, boredom, maybe just the need to know. The trail wound to the left and dipped a bit into a flat clearing. The smell got worse. My eyes were watering, and I had to breathe through my mouth, which didn't help much. I kept scanning the woods, expecting to see some bloated shape just off the trail. But nothing. Just trees and ferns and patches of moss-covered stone. Then I felt it. The ground beneath my tires felt off soft, like I was rolling over a sponge. I stopped and got off the bike. When I put my foot down, I realized I wasn't imagining it. The earth had give like wet sand, but not muddy, just loose. I shifted my weight and the ground sort of squished beneath my boots. I jumped lightly a couple of times, and that's when it happened. Juices, thick, dark, foul, squirted up through the sandy soil. Not water, something else. Thick and foul smelling, like a mix of meat left out in the sun and something chemical. I backed off, but the feeling didn't leave me. I looked around and found a branch started poking at the ground. The top layer was loose sand, not deep. After a few pokes, I struck something. It didn't feel like rock or wood. It gave slightly, then bounced back. I dug more, pushing the sand aside with the stick, and after a minute or two, I saw it. Flesh. It was a pale gray-brown mass, bloated and riddled with holes. Maggots squirmed across the surface. I gagged and stumbled back. The smell hit me all over again, worse now that it was disturbed. I didn't know what I was looking at. It was too big for a deer, too wrong. No visible bones, no fur or hair, just rotting meat with patches of something dark and wet oozing from it. I didn't touch it again. I walked back to my truck, bike in hand, and sat there with the door open, trying to calm down. My hands were shaking. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone and called the police. I kept the call simple, just told them I'd found what looked like a dead animal buried in the woods, and it smelled bad enough to be worth checking out. The guy on the other end asked where exactly I was, and I gave him the GPS coordinates. He said someone would be there shortly. I waited. Maybe 20 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up behind me. One officer, maybe in his early 40s, plain uniform, no name tag I could see. He got out and asked me where the site was. No small talk, no questions about what I saw, just asked me to lead the way. So I did. We walked about 5 minutes into the trail. The smell was worse now. The air was still and warm, no breeze to carry it away. When we got close to the spot, I pointed toward the soft patch. He didn't move at first, just stood there, taking it in. Then he turned to look at me, not curious, not thankful. Just this blank, unreadable look that slowly hardened into something else. He didn't say anything, but the message was clear in his eyes. He didn't want me there. He told me I was free to go. No thanks, no explanation, just that. So I left. I got in the truck and drove straight back to the hotel. Took the longest shower I could stand, but I still felt like the smell was on me. That kind of smell doesn't just sit on your clothes, it gets in your nose, in your throat, behind your eyes. Couldn't shake it. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. What the hell had I found? Over the next few days I kept checking the news. Nothing. No reports of a dead animal being found. No missing person updates, no roadkill cleanup gone wrong. I looked up any kind of animal dumping practices in the area, tried to convince myself it was just a cow or a horse someone buried illegally. But the shape of it, the size, the way it felt underfoot, I don't know. It didn't sit right. A week later, I drove past that same trailhead again. There was no tape, no signs, no indication that anything had ever happened there. I thought about going back to look, but I couldn't. Something about the way that officer looked at me stuck in my head. He wasn't surprised. He didn't ask me what I thought it was. He just wanted me gone, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I stayed in that hotel for another 3 months, kept biking, but never on that side of the mountain again. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had buried something they didn't want found. And maybe someone else, someone with a badge, was fine with it staying buried. Even now, more than a year later, I still check sometimes. I type in keywords online when I can't sleep. A Scutney dead body, Vermont buried remains, NH/VT police investigation, Route 44A. Still nothing. It's like it never happened. But I remember how the ground felt. I remember the sound it made when I jumped on it. I remember the look in the cop's eyes. And I remember the smell. That's not something you forget. It was a cool Saturday morning in late September, somewhere around the high 50s, with the kind of crisp air that made you want to get outside before the cold of Georgia winter crept in. The sky was clear, sunlight streaming through the trees, as if the forest itself was wide awake. My friend Kate was visiting from Colorado, and she'd been asking to see some of the lesser-known hiking trails in the North Georgia mountains. Real woods, nothing touristy. I knew the perfect place. A 7-mile loop not far from Helen, quiet, not too trafficked, with a few nice views along the ridges and a stream that ran along the first few miles. I'd hiked it a handful of times before without any trouble. Peaceful, empty. It had always felt like mine, like a secret spot. We parked at the trailhead just before 10 a.m. There were only 2 other cars there, which was typical. I carried a small pack with water and snacks, and Kate had her camera out, snapping pictures of leaves and mushrooms and those little things I'd usually walk right past. It was early fall, so the leaves were just starting to change. Bright reds and soft oranges mixed with all the deep greens. The air smelled like dirt and dry leaves and pine. We were maybe 4 miles in on a part of the loop where the trail levels out and opens a bit. That's when we saw him. At first, it was just the sound of boots on leaves, coming from ahead of us. A man came into view, walking in the opposite direction. He was huge, probably 6 feet 4 inches and thick-built, not fat, just large, like he had strength under all that size. He was only wearing denim overalls. No shirt, no shoes. His chest and arms were pale and wide, and his feet were thick and dirty like he hadn't worn shoes in a long time. The weirdest part, besides the bare feet and how silent he moved, was his toenails. They were long, yellowed, some of them curled over the tips of his toes. I remember staring at them longer than I should have. Strapped to his waist was a big hunting knife. Not just some standard pocket knife either, this one had a wide blade and looked used. The handle was worn, dirty. It caught the sun when he moved. He smiled at us like we were old friends. His teeth were stained and uneven. Then he said, "Hello." We both said hi back automatically, like you do on trails even when something in your brain tells you not to. He looked at Kate and said, "She's beautiful." There was a pause. It wasn't a compliment. Felt like a statement. Not friendly, not weird on the surface, but something about the way he said it made both of us freeze up. I looked at Kate. She looked at me. Then, without a word, we started walking faster. I let her walk ahead, and I kept checking over my shoulder. I didn't see him turn around, but I also didn't hear him walking away. There was no more sound at all. We moved fast, not quite running, but just below that, like we didn't want to look scared, but we were. The trail wound up through thicker trees, and every 10 or 15 steps I glanced back. Nothing. When we finally got back to the car, we didn't even talk about it. Just got in, locked the doors, and only after we were halfway down the road did Kate say, "What the hell was that?" A few months passed. Kate flew home. I stayed busy and didn't think much about the trail. I wrote off the encounter as one of those weird forest things. Stranger than usual, sure, but nothing that crossed the line. I hiked other places, always with friends, but part of me still liked that loop. I missed the quiet of it. So one Sunday morning, with the weather just perfect, overcast, 60s and quiet, I decided to go back. Just me and my dog, Hank, a stocky black lab mix who doesn't scare easy. I figured it'd be a good chance to clear my head. The parking lot was empty when we got there. That felt right. It was early, not many people came out this way unless they knew about it. First few miles were just like I remembered. Hank sniffed everything, tail wagging. The leaves had mostly fallen by now, so the trail had that kind of soft crunch underfoot, and you could see deeper into the woods on either side. Around mile 5, I remember feeling relaxed, like maybe I'd been overreacting last time. But then mile 6 hit. I came around a bend in the trail that leads into a small clearing before the last incline, just before the switchbacks. That's when I saw them. 3 men. 1 standing, 2 kneeling. The man standing was bald. Not shaved bald, completely hairless. No eyebrows, no stubble, nothing. His skin was pale, like he didn't get sunlight. He was wearing a long brown robe that looked like it belonged in some kind of church, but not any kind I knew. The 2 kneeling men wore all white. Their shirts, pants, even their shoes, if you could call them that, were pure white. They were facing the bald man with their heads bowed, humming in some low, strange tone that didn't sound like any tune. More like a sound you feel in your chest than hear with your ears. I stopped walking. Hank froze too. His ears went flat and he let out this low growl, which he almost never does. I didn't know if I should say anything or turn around, but I didn't get the chance to decide. The bald man looked up and made direct eye contact with me. His eyes were strange. Something about them looked old, but not in a wrinkled way. Just tired, hollow. He raised one hand slowly and said, "Life is a gift." The second he said that, the two kneeling men stopped humming and snapped their heads toward me at the same time. Not just turned, snapped. Quick and stiff like mannequins in a horror movie. My heart was pounding. I felt the blood drain from my face. All I could think to say was, "Heck yeah, it is." And then I just walked past them, fast. Not running, but fast enough to make it clear I didn't want to stop and talk. As I passed them, the two in white went right back to humming, but I could still feel the bald guy staring at me. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. It was like if I did, something bad would happen. Hank didn't bark again, but he kept close to me, ears still flat. We hiked the rest of that switchback trail in near silence, and I didn't stop until we were back at the car. I sat in the front seat for a few minutes, trying to breathe slow, trying to calm my hands. I looked down the trail and saw nothing. No one followed us. No sound. Just the trees, the wind, and the occasional bird. But something felt off, like the woods were holding their breath. I left and didn't look back. I haven't been back to that trail since. Not because I believe in ghosts or monsters or anything like that. I don't. But I believe in people. And I know what I saw was real. I don't care if there's some backwoods cult or some strange hermit who walks barefoot through the trees. Either way, that place doesn't feel safe anymore. Not the trail, not the woods around it, not the air itself. There's something about walking alone in places where people weren't meant to live that lets you see the parts of the world you're not supposed to see. And once you see them, it sticks with you. When I close my eyes sometimes, I still see that guy's toenails, or the way those two men turned their heads so fast, like something had snapped inside them. I still think about the way the bald man said life is a gift, like it was both a blessing and a threat. I've hiked a lot of trails since then, but not that one. Never again.